We're now being held to ransom for half of our income. How can they do that? How can a government hold a vital and essential service in our society to ransom?
Emma Morton has run this busy childcare centre in Canberra for more than 2 decades.
Woohoo! Easy peasy.
Emma says she's facing financial ruin over the next 3 months unless she closes her doors.
A conservative estimate is at least a loss of around $400,000. This is not good enough. We want to be here in the long term, so we will freeze what we have now, we'll ride it out, and we'll be back on the other side.
Last week, the government announced that centres would no longer be able to charge parents for childcare, taking the burden off already struggling families. It agreed to pay up to half of each centre's hourly fees, as well as a wage for childcare workers through the already announced JobKeeper subsidy, as long as the centres remain open. Providers say the current plan leaves them with an enormous funding gap.
If you go to the supermarket and you fill your trolley, and when you get to the checkout, you tell them, I'm going to pay for half of my groceries and you need to subsidise the rest, do you think that that supermarket would allow that to happen? Absolutely not. We have been placed in a position where we need to provide the same service on half of our income.
Ordinarily, this time of year, we could expect somewhere between 75 to 80,000 in revenue of funding and parent fees, and what we're actually going to receive is around about 35,000.
Kitty Connors and her staff care for more than 100 kids at their centre in Geelong.
What did we build before?
A roller-coaster.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
She's going to extreme measures to keep her doors open following the government's announcement last week.
I've since applied for a very large loan, but what that means is at the end of this pandemic and when things start to return to normal, we'll be in debt. And there'll be others whose hands are tied and have no option other than to close.
That's a frightening prospect for parents who rely on childcare, like Morgan Sutton.
That would mean that potentially my husband and I would actually be becoming unemployed ourselves, because we would have to take some substantial amount of time off work to care for our children.
The situation is even more dire for the hundreds of council-run childcare centres across the country, which aren't eligible for the JobKeeper wage subsidy. Some New South Wales councils had already closed their centres or were planning to do so.
We have a revenue drop-off of 50%. That will equate to a $500,000 loss every month. Obviously, this figure is not sustainable for council.
Today, a reprieve, with $82 million from the New South Wales government to help its council-run centres cover the gap. But that's only one state, and still no relief for the thousands of private operators across the country facing an uncertain future.
The government believe that they've found a solution, but we know our services best. We weren't consulted, and one size does not fit all.
There's a lot of parents that are nurses, that are doctors, that are tradesmen. We're no longer going to be able to work. I can just imagine the thousands of families across Australia that it's going to affect.
Centres will try their hardest to be there for their families, but they will close because they will run out of money. Educators will lose hours, lose their jobs. If the government wants to show commitment, cover the gap. The income that they have removed from us, cover it. Pay that gap.
I really feel for the childcare workers who are going to be on the front line with kids who are going home to parents who are working on the front line. And I don't understand how we overcome this situation. I don't understand how we have a win for everyone. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I know that's not a lot of brain power, but what's the answer? What's the answer?
Well, I think unfortunately with these things, the answer is always more money, which is a problem because we don't have it, right?
Well, how open is the chequebook?
Right, so if they're paying half and these childcare centres are saying they want to double it, this is already a multi-billion-dollar package. Can you keep going to that well?
Well, not when we don't know what's going... We can't look into the future. We hope everyone does the right thing. But what if there is a huge spike in 2 weeks' time after Easter and our health resources are put on the line? Is the money going to be needed there?
On the flip side, though, like, I can see the argument these guys are making, and they tend to be smaller childcare centres. You're not talking about those big chains that are doing it. But if you're a government that's come up with a policy and the whole reason for that policy is to keep a sector alive, then I think what they're saying is you either do it or you don't. If you do it, if you're half pregnant, then actually you're just spending money and it's not achieving anything. So you may as well just go the whole hog. The question is, once you get to the bigger centres, whether or not it does make a difference, I suppose.
I suppose it'd be interesting to see if something happens in the next couple of weeks.
Well, yeah. Policy's changing quite rapidly at the moment. Yeah.
Well, in a statement, the Education Department said eligible childcare services can apply for small business and exceptional circumstances payments on top of the funding that they've already announced, and the full statement is on our website.